So what are the latest trends in the private jet industry? And that's what we're going to be talking about in today's episode. So welcome to the channel. If it's your first time here, I encourage you to subscribe. Lots of people that watch the channel actually don't subscribe, so please subscribe. It does help the algorithm tell everybody about BizJet TV and help the world understand that, private aviation is here. It's a great way to travel for business, but it's also a great way to travel for leisure. And there's more and more people traveling for leisure purposes on private jets these days. So let's go into what's actually happening and what the innovations and what are the trends in private aviation that are happening right now and are going to continue as we move into the new year in 2025. Well, the first thing is SAF. SAF means sustainable aviation fuel. This is something that has been tested by a number of different aircraft manufacturers, both in the private jet space and also the airlines. We see Gulfstream and Bombardier at the forefront of this in the private jet space, offering up to 80% reduction in the life cycle carbon emissions compared to traditional jet fuel. So this is exactly what's happening. However, a sustainable fuel does cost a little bit more than normal fuel. Now, of course, as this develops, the cost to make this fuel will come down as more and more people use it, and so consequently the price will come down. But sustainable aviation fuel is something that's here. A lot of FBOs are now starting to offer it, and so it is an option if you're flying, if you want to offset your carbon emissions or whatever and make the planet better and less polluted when you're flying on your private jet, then sustainable aviation fuel is certainly the way to go, and it is already available in certain airports and for certain types of aircraft. So check on that if you are operating a particular aircraft, or if you're looking to buy an aircraft and you are into this whole environment thing and you really want to have an aircraft that's sustainable, that uses sustainable aviation fuel, then you need to look into buying an aircraft that can actually use that type of fuel. The second thing is enhanced connectivity and in-flight experience. Now, of course, it's interesting to see that the internet hasn't been available on aircraft up until recently. Now, in the United States, there's a GoGo system which you can use throughout the US, and a lot of aircraft in America do actually have this system. But in Europe, it's that system wouldn't work. The only way to have Wi-Fi on an airplane in Europe is to have the satellite-based one. But the Ka band system is not available for all aircraft. It's also very expensive. I heard a horror story a few weeks ago about a flight between East Coast US and London, and with I think 4 or 5 passengers, and their internet bill for that flight was $23,000. So what's happening now is Starlink are launching a lot of satellites into orbit. These are low-level satellites, level orbit satellites, as you say, and they work really, really well. Installing Starlink on your aircraft is something that we're doing right now for a client of mine. We just bought a G4 SP, and we're having Starlink installed on the aircraft. The cost is just under $400,000, and then once it's installed, it's about $10,000 a month for unlimited usage. Now, I've spoken to people that have used Starlink on private jets. They said it's absolutely fantastic. It's even faster and a better experience than the internet that you have in your office or in your home. So this is coming now, and Starlink are getting their systems certified for more and more aircraft. At the moment, it's the bigger ones, but the antennas are getting smaller, because that's always the issue. Can I fit Starlink on my airplane? Is there an antenna which is small enough to fit on my aircraft? And of course, when we're talking aircraft, you can't just go and buy something and stick it on the airplane. It needs to be certified. It needs to go through a certification process, and it needs to be fitted by somebody that's licensed to do that. So these are all things which are important. But it's coming for the smaller aircraft, the Phenom 100 and 300. It's already in the making. The supplemental type certificate should be out next year at some stage. So we're going to see in the next 2 or 3 years more and more aircraft or private jets with connectivity. And of course, we've got this younger demographic now coming into the private jet space and traveling private or buying private jets. And these are all people that were born with the internet. So they're used to having the internet ever since they were kids. I mean, when I was a kid, the internet didn't exist. So for somebody that's, in their early 30s or even early 40s, for them to step on an airplane and be in the air for 10 hours and not being able to connect with their office or their family or with the rest of the world, it's something that they're not used to, and so they want to have this connectivity. And so the technology is there, it's rolling out, and that's why on this G4SP, which is an older aircraft, we're having it installed, as the owner wants to be able to be connected at all times, in particular on the transatlantic flights, without spending through the nose for something like the KA band, which costs like double to install and costs a lot more to run. So that's there. Also, the other thing which we're seeing now is supersonic travel is going to be returning with Boom Aerospace, already test flying their aircraft. And now the Boom Aerospace aircraft called Avbuyer is an aircraft designed for airlines, but they will be developing a private jet version, which basically means just changing the cabin layout. Instead of having 40, 50 seats, you'll have maybe 10, 12 seats in private jet configuration. So we are going to be seeing supersonic air travel come back and coming into the private jet space as well. So that's another trend that we see developing. There was a project of Ariane Aerospace that'd been out there for 12, 13 years now, and they were trying to get the design of a private jet which was supersonic. But unfortunately that project failed. I think the reason why Boom Aerospace is succeeding is because they're targeting the airlines. And of course, when an airline orders some airplanes, they order 10, 12, 15, 20 aircraft. When someone goes and buys a private jet, they usually buy one. And so I think Boom Aerospace have got it right. So we're coming back with this, and it's easy for that airplane to be developed into a private jet by just changing the interior like they've done with the Boeing business jet and the Airbus corporate jet. Fourth trend we have is the advanced autonomous systems. And this is really interesting. There's lots of talk of airplanes being operated by one pilot. This is already happening in the private jet world. We see this with the Citations, which many years have been operated single pilot. We see it with the Honda jet. We see it with Embraer with their Phenom 100 and 300s. But these are usually small airplanes with limited range. Now, Honda's developing their new aircraft, the Echelon, which is going to have a 2,600 nautical mile range. So that's going to be interesting. But the most interesting thing in this space is the fact that Garmin have developed a system which is already operational, certified and operational on the Vision jet built by Cirrus, where basically if, and this Cirrus jet is operated by one pilot, but let's say the pilot passes out or suddenly dies, how is the passenger going to get the airplane on the ground? They just have to press the button and the AI will take over, talk to air traffic control and take the aircraft down and land it at the nearest suitable airport. So that is already in existence, and I can see this technology being developed for larger aircraft and eventually getting onto the flight deck of the airliners. So I think we will be seeing airliners flying around with one pilot and AI as the co-pilot, and then eventually we will be moving into completely autonomous aircraft with no pilots. Now, is this down the road? Is this 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line? I'm not sure yet, but if we think of SpaceX launching their rockets into space, to the space station, the astronauts are actually not flying this. It's flown by AI most of the time. So, that capability is already there. It's just a matter of, using it more and getting, the public used to having a machine fly them from A to B instead of a human being. Now, the next thing which is happening is the vertical takeoff and landing, the VTOLs, the electric VTOLs, the hybrid VTOLs. This is something that there are many projects out there. There's over 500 projects right now around the world. And this is kind of the evolution of the drone. So drones are usually small. They use them for photography and things like that. And it has replaced helicopters on things like traffic watch, pipeline surveys and things like that. And now drones are also doing delivery of small items, and drones are getting bigger and they're being able to start to carry 500-600 kilo packages. And so now they're developing these drones, if you want to call them drones, that can actually fly people. And so we've seen a lot of these electrical vertical takeoff and landing projects. You've seen me talk about it before here on BizJet TV. Lots of projects out there, and we've got a lot of big players involved, from Toyota to Samsung, and Google, amongst three of the large companies that produce cars and computers and whatnot, that are involved in making these eVTOLs and VTOLs. So Vertical Aerospace and Joby Aviation and Lilium Jet tend to be the three which are leading the space. The challenge with the electrical vertical takeoff and landing is that it takes a lot of power to get this thing in the air and take off vertically like this. So some projects are now having them take off this way, or they're introducing hybrid versions where you take off conventionally with conventional fuel and then you turn into electric once you're in the air, and off you go. So lots of different types of those projects are being developed right now. So we're going to see them taking to the skies, certified in that over the next few years, and that's going to change how we travel privately as well. And the next and last but not least is focus on health and safety. We've seen the introduction, in particular since the COVID thing happened, of the HEPA filters on a lot of these private jets. We've also seen a lot of different manufacturers lower the pressurization in the cabin. So this is really, really good, because if you've got the HEPA filters which are purifying the air and you manage to lower the cabin altitude to 3,000-4,000 feet, which has already been done on some of the jets, compared to the 8,000 feet which you get in the cabin when you're flying with the airliner, this does make a big difference. In particular on a long flight, there's lots of talk about jet lag, and everybody thinks that jet lag's to do with the time zone, but a lot of the time it's to do with the air and the pressurization. So, if you're sitting on an airplane for 10 hours at 8,000 feet, obviously there's less oxygen, so your body has to, work a lot harder to keep things going. And so when you get off the airplane, you're a lot more tired than you are when you're on the ground. So this is something that's part of the jet lag thing. And then, of course, the air which is recirculated through the cabin is recirculated. It's air which is bypassed from the engines and that obviously is not really very good air. So introducing the HEPA filters, which cleanses the air and helps that. And if there's anybody with a virus on board, it will eliminate that virus and recirculate that air as purified air. So this is improving health and safety of all those people that are traveling on the private jet. So these are kind of things that are happening right now. We've seen a lot of change with the avionics. We're seeing tweaks on the engines, on the aerodynamics now. Airplanes are going to be going faster. We're seeing, the more of an introduction of AI into the cockpit. So things are really, really improving. We're going to get faster. We're, more efficient. Also more in tune with nature as we use sustainable aviation fuel. These are all the trends which we see right now in the private jet aviation world. And the other trend I'll throw in there is we're seeing more and more people fly private, and interestingly enough, they're not flying so much for business these days, because they understand that with the internet we can do video calls, and that's a very effective way of having a meeting with somebody. And of course we've got virtual reality, and you can have a virtual reality meeting with somebody as well. But we're seeing a lot of people travel for holidays and that on private jet. And we're also seeing a lot more people now taking an interest in actually doing the flying themselves. And so they're buying an aircraft and they're doing the flying themselves. And there are flight safety issues with that, because it's always a good idea to have a professional with you, or to be trained in a certain way if you are going to buy and fly your own airplane. And I've talked about this a lot here on BizJet TV. But that's all from me on this episode with the trends. Have you seen any other trends that maybe I haven't talked about on this episode? Just ping a message in the comments below if you want to reach out to me for a one-to-one call and see what we can do here to help you with your private jet needs. We're here to help. And that's all for Fabrizio on BizJet TV, and I'll see you on the next one.